Hello everybody and welcome back. Today's tutorial is a quick lesson on the WELT seam. The WELT seam is almost like the flat felt seam. It gives a flat, smoother and unfrayed finish look to the seam edge. It's less bulky and often used on thicker fabrics like jeans fabric. There are two ways of creating the WELT seam. Using a rectangular pattern, cut out 2 pieces of fabric. Because it's hard to tell the difference between the right side and the wrong side, I marked one side of the fabric pieces with an X. Place the fabric pieces together, right side to right side. Then sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance to join the 2 pieces together. 1/2 inch seam allowance is indicated by the dashed lines. Next, place both pieces of fabric under the presser foot to stitch it together with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Stitch forward a little bit the 2 pieces together and then back stitch to lock your stitches in place so that it doesn't come loose. When you get to the end, back stitch again to lock your stitches in place so that it doesn't come loose. Next, press the seam allowance open. Then trim one of the seam allowance down to 1/8 of an inch. Then press the untrimmed seam to one side to lay over the trimmed seam. You could serge or zigzag the edge of the untrimmed seam to prevent it from fraying. Flip the fabric on its right side and you will need to do a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance away from the original seam. Finally, do a 1/4 top stitch away from the original seam, making sure you're stitching on the side where the untrimmed seam is facing. Here is what the welt seam looks like on the wrong side and what it looks like on the right side. Trimmed seam is enclosed inside the bigger seam. On the wrong side, the welt seam has 2 rows of stitches and the flat felt seam has 1 row of stitch. On the right side, the welt seam has 1 row of stitch and the flat felt has 2 rows of stitches. In this second method, I'm going to start from the ironing process. Press the seam allowance open. Then press the seam allowance to one side. Then sew a top stitch that is 1/4 inch from the first seam line, making sure that your top stitch is holding down the excess seam underneath. In this second method, there was no need to trim down one of the seams. And those are the 2 ways that you can create a welt seam. Okay everyone, we've come to the end of this tutorial. If I have helped further your fashion designing experience, please subscribe to my channel, give this video a thumbs up, share and leave your comment down below. Until my next video, bye!